up a scene. Coffee cup, cat's tail, dancing in the steam. Every little click spins a brand new theme. Mrs. Right, that's right.
And here we are again. Welcome to another episode of the Mrs. Right podcast with me, Bronte Bennett, author of The Squire and host of the Mrs. Right podcast. I am delighted to have with me today Áine Greaney, author of Trespassers and Other Stories. And we're going to learn more about the book and about Áine in just a moment. So Áine, I'm going to come over to you and ask you to tell us a bit about yourself with your Once Upon a Time story.
Once upon a time, we as children in Ireland, we lived with our grandparents, and my grandfather was the master storyteller. And I can remember, because we lived on a farm, the stories would always not be narrated by him, but by a witch or a rabbit or a fox. And of course, the witch was my favorite. And it would always open with a Once Upon a Time. It would open with, Áine, I was going up the fields, and do you know who I met? And of course you'd say, who, Grandad? I met the witch, your friend the witch. And you know what the witch told me? And you'd say, who, what? And the witch told me a story. And then the whole story would be narrated in a witch voice or a fox voice or a rabbit voice.
Wow.
And years later, I came to America and I was in a master's program, a university program. I was listening to all this about the third person narrator and I thought, what are you talking about? I learned this when I was 3.5. I know all about narrators, witches, rabbits. You mean I'm paying university fees to hear about this?
How magical. That sounds so magical.
Wonderful. And he was and he could do all the voices.
Wow.
And as a child, you fall in love with the voice, the rabbit voice and the fox voice, So there was, as a child, you don't know how lucky you are to have something like that, where you're hanging on his every word, the fox's every word. And the story would have a beginning, middle, and an end. So it is. It's a lovely to be on a fireside armchair with an old man who's had a lovely gentle voice, and to just all these rabbits and foxes telling stories. So that's I think that would be what they call the origin story.
Wow, you have just woven such a beautiful bit of imagery for me and some real nostalgia, the art of storytelling, and to have experienced it that young. When did your storytelling journey begin?
Well, our English curriculum in Ireland was heavy on short stories. Like short fiction was our first introduction into literature and that academic take the test, tick the box stuff. And we actually we learned short stories in 3 languages. Maupassant was my best friend. And then in our native Gaeilge or Irish, and then in English, which would have been the typical canon, the sort of big writers, big authors. So I think, literary short stories were very standard for me. It was what I knew. But I do remember, again, I suppose a farm girl is a farm girl is a farm girl. Because I remember in the 6th class, so I would have been 11. I was always younger than my classmates. I remember we were learning about the old woolen factories in Ireland. I remember that. And we had a homework to do about, where you had to spill back what you had learned. And I remember I went in with my little copybook. Do you remember the copybooks, Bronte?
Yeah, I do.
And I went in and I had written a story from the sheep's back to mine. And I remember it was a male teacher. And I remember him because he was looking for it. You tick the box,
Yeah.
The factory started in 18 such thing, whatever, But I had from the sheep's back to mine, and I had a story about the sweater, the woolen sweater, and how it started out in a field on a sheep's back, and then it made its way by a curvy path onto my back, as a school cardigan.
Wow.
Yeah.
You definitely inherited your grandfather's natural storytelling ability. And that's just lovely. Really I really like
Yeah.
that. Okay, so there
The
you
teacher
are.
didn't. May I say that the teacher didn't? He was not impressed.
Didn't appreciate it. What can you
No.
say?
What can
Just,
you say?
in his face now, look at you now is what I would say to that. Yeah, I sometimes have one of those in your face now teacher moments when I think about how much I've achieved compared with how much they said I might. They were like, yeah, you're never going to come to anything. I was like, oh, well, I'll prove you wrong. Okay, so there you are, a cute little thing in Ireland, growing up in the farm. I mean, you're creating conjuring wonderful imagery, and then through your education system, you start writing short stories. What happened next? How do you end up in America, and how do you end up as an author?
Well, I always also kept a diary, always, like from about 13, 14 years of age. But I abandoned writing for a long time because I was busy thinking I was an adult, which I wasn't, but I thought I was, including, all the going to concerts and, the usual. And I was in a teaching job in a very remote village in Ireland, and actually unemployment was particularly high at the time, so it was the only job I got. And the only writing I did there was in a diary, in a journal. I did try one short story, I remember, at my kitchen table. And then this opportunity came to take a leave of absence, a government leave of absence from my teaching job. So I did, and came to America to just kind of to really go back to being young again, because I was too young to be actually in that job. I came out of college fairly young, and it felt this is the rest of my life. And yeah, I mean, there's a government pension, but you can't even pronounce the word pension at age 20. You really can't, And it doesn't matter to you either. You couldn't care less. But anyway, in my mid-20s, I came to the United States on a 6-month visa. And I met somebody, and the rest, as they say, is kind of history. But I do remember, I remember walking downtown in the city I lived in at the time, and everything was so foreign and strange and new. And do you remember Woolworths?
Yeah, I do. I miss it.
They're gone, and I miss it as well.
I know, right? It's
Yeah.
very sad. It's the internet. I blame the internet.
Just gone. And they had great novels. But anyway, I remember walking into this Woolworths, kind of delighted that America had Woolworths, just like Ireland had Woolworths. And I went in and I bought a copybook. And for some reason, I felt the need to kind of write all my problems with adjusting and the terrible weather. I mean, it was sub-zero freezing weather.
Wow.
And I think that might have been the start of, where I made writing a regular kind of habit in my Woolworths. In my Woolworths copybook.
Did you have notions growing up about being a writer? Was it something that featured in your ambitions?
Oh, I would have.
It did.
Well, I was an Enid Blyton best friend. I won't say reader or fan. I was her best friend and her character's best friends. They were my best friend. And when I would be hiding from housework and general tasks like homework and housework and reading my Enid Blyton books, I remember thinking, like, it must be just magic to be able to, create these characters, George, and, and going to the seaside and solving all these puzzles and mysteries, and, outfoxing the local constables. Like, that to me was just magic. And I thought, if I could be Enid, the world would change its shape. It really would. So I think I probably did deep down, because to me a book was the most magical place to be. It was it was my life, really. Well, it really was my life. And as you know, as an author, the whole joy of those books, and then later your adult books, is that you can be on this small rural farm, but you're not. You're in Cornwall, you're by the seaside, you're on an island. That was the joy for me, that I could be in those places with my friends, my new friends, drinking their ginger beer, without being there, Like, I remember looking up from the book sometimes, and it would be a shock to say, oh, I'm still here, in the real place. But they had that power to transport you to a place of your imagination.
So at what point did you go from whimsical writing, mostly for your own pleasure, to moving into something more serious and purposeful?
Well, I was when I was in upstate New York, still adjusting, and very casually going out with this fellow, who's now my husband. But I saw this thing. I don't even know where I saw it, Bronte. I saw it someplace. There's this fellowship, a winter fellowship, by a Canadian author in the state university, the government university, in short fiction writing. And I thought, well, that's nonsense. And I left it aside. I don't know where I saw the ad. I really don't. And I left it aside. But eventually I said, all right, I'll give it a try. Don't be so negative. And I wrote a short story, which was based on a true story from the farm, my parents' and grandparents' farm, and sent it in. And lo and behold, I get this letter. And now, in those days, it would have been in the post letter, with a stamp on it.
Yeah.
Saying, you've been accepted. And I thought, oh, is this Canadian author, is he drunk? Or what's wrong with him?
You had so much faith in yourself.
I don't write. What's he talking about? All I do is scribble in a diary every night. Yeah. And this is actually a true story. Does he not know the difference between truth and fiction? But I got accepted, and it was life-changing. It really was, And I don't think I ever told my classmates or him that it was actually a true story. I don't think I ever did. I acted like it was fiction. I don't know if they ever saw the difference.
I think that most fiction's got an element of fact in it anyway. Yeah. So, you can blur the edges. That's all good.
Yeah.
And it's the way you wrote it that got you the position in that, not that, that somebody else in the retelling might not have achieved what you achieved, that transfixed and encouraged. We have to believe in our skill as wordsmiths to create imagery and emotion through our writing, and I think you must have done exactly that.
Maybe. And an interesting thing, Bronte, the first night he was ticking the names, taking the roll call, and he said, Áine Greaney, and I said, and he said, you're supposed to be a man, and I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, and you're supposed to be elderly, and I said, not yet, no. I think I was only about 30 or 28 at the time. And he said, but your story. I said, well, I honestly, I really am a woman and I'm not elderly. So he must, from the reading of it, as a reader, you do make these assumptions about the narrator. And he thought I was this older man, and he thought I was from the UK, not Ireland. And, so you never really know, do you, how your story will be read?
No, it's so very personal, the way that we perceive the characters that are drawn, the author that's written them, a number of books I've read, and then been super surprised to discover that the writer is either very young or very old.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Oh my God. Or, like you say, especially if they have names that are just initials and surnames, that they're not the gender that I thought they would be. So of course we make a certain amount of assumptions. But it's nice that you managed to prove him wrong. Very obviously prove him wrong as a young woman.
Those were the days.
Oh, tell me about, let's not go on that. That's another podcast. No. So tell me about the first book that you submitted that you put out into the world. Tell me a little bit about your work, your books, in fact.
It was called The Big House, and it was based on, growing up, we were within almost eye view of a big colonial mansion, a Downton Abbey style mansion. It was gone by then, and as a child, it had a huge orchard, or at least it seemed like that as a child. And of course, you can't have a local child in an orchard. You know what you're going to do. You're going to go in there and have the apples. I remember during that, the ruined house that we thought was the big house was actually the servants' quarters. And we would play in there, my brothers and me. But anyway, here in America, I wrote a novel called The Big House.
So tell me more. What happened next?
Yes. Well, that was actually a 2-book contract. And then I wrote the second book, and the they didn't accept that. And I can see kind of why, At the time, the publisher also stopped carrying fiction. So I don't know which, preceded which, their decision to not do fiction or the actual book. I took that very badly. I was very disappointed because I had this very unreal bit of luck that made me think the publishing industry was much easier and more accessible than it is. I took to my diary, and I think I wrote a full diary on how I was stopping writing, stopping this nonsense. Who the hell did I think I was? I had a day job at the time. Why don't I just focus on the day job? And I'm not writing anymore. And then when I had written about 60 pages on that topic of not writing, I wrote 60 pages about not writing.
The irony.
I thought, oh, the irony. Should you please stop your whining and just get back to a new book?
Stop denying yourself.
My next book is a non-fiction book. It was during the economic recession, lost my job, and I had very little money. And I pitched a book it's called Writer with a Day Job. And at the time I was teaching writing a good bit in the community. And again, I just got kind of, like you say, oh, for God's sake, recession. I'm going to write a book that'll help people like me who are trying to make a living, or not make a living, but try and stretch out your money.
Yeah.
So that got accepted fairly quickly as well by Writer's Digest books on how to manage, two lives: the day job, which keeps your mortgage paid and groceries in your fridge, and creative or personal, writing. So that was a bit of luck that came out. My surprise actually was that nobody had written that before, because most of us are balancing two lives,
Yeah. So there will be plenty of people listening to this who are thinking, yeah, I could do with a bit of help with that, actually, because I have a day job, a business to run that keeps the money coming in, and I'm writing and I'm podcasting, and the balance, it's difficult. So if you've got any top tips, this is the place to share them, because I think we could all do with help with that.
And it's the voice switch too. Like your work voice is quite different, isn't it? It's quite different, and then you have this deeper contemplative voice that's, if some of your colleagues ever heard it, they wouldn't know who it was.
Okay, so The Big House, what came next?
So there were those short stories, and then The Writer with a Day Job. And then I published a set of essays about being an immigrant in America. Green Card and other essays. That's what a small publisher who specialized in books like that, immigrant stories. That's a small book again, very nicely crafted, and that's that kind of essays. What am I forgetting? Oh yes, sorry, another novel, Dance Lessons.
Oh.
And again, that hops back and forth between the US and rural Ireland, very rural, a farm Ireland. And it's about a woman who's French Canadian American, and who was married to this Irish fellow. And he dies in a sailing accident off Martha's Vineyard. And after he dies, she finds out that his whole life had been a lie. There were several things he didn't tell her, like he had told her that his mother was dead. No, she wasn't dead. She was running the farm in Ireland still. There was an estrangement there, but he said that he was an orphan. His father had died young. That was true, but the mother was still very, very much alive and a very cantankerous character. So she decides on a whim to go there, and because they'd never gone there because he had no family there, but he did.
Yeah.
And so the main character, the American character, goes there to find out what the hell is this all about. So then it's in two timelines. It's in the timeline of her going there and staying in a small town little hotel to find out who is my mother-in-law kind of thing, and what was my husband. Why did he tell all these lies? And then there's the backward timeline, the historical timeline of the mother's life, and an arranged marriage, and that late 1940s, 1950s life on a farm. So there are two timelines, of the main character and then the historical
And that's
sort
called
of
dance
lessons.
lessons.
And that's still available, yeah.
Sounds wonderful. I have to say that sounds wonderful. And I love a dual timeline. I wish I was clever enough to write dual timeline. That's one of my ambitions for my future as a writer, because I love reading them. So let's talk about Trespassers and Other Stories. Tell us about that.
That's big surprise. That also zigzags back and forth between coastal. I live on the coast in Massachusetts, and it zigzags back and forth between the coast here and rural Ireland. Surprise!
I mean, there's a theme. But they
Just
say,
like me.
Write what you know.
Write what you know.
And write what you know. And then it's, you're sharing insights from your own memories and your own knowledge, which is a beautiful thing. Tell us more.
Well, the characters are mostly women. There's only one male main character. I didn't realize this till, the publisher was writing up a PR blurb on it. The characters range from 17 to 87. There's one very elderly character. There are a couple of elderly characters. And, one story is called The Granny Flat. So obviously it's a granny. A very cantankerous granny. And then there's a teenage character, Irish, whose parents have just got divorced and they were very wealthy. And now the wealth is all gone. It's about the post Celtic Tiger economic boom crash. And, she suddenly has to move to America because her mother had citizenship. And her mother, they have to just completely reinvent their lives from this very glamorous, house on the Costa del Sol, blah, 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 very glamorous life, to this very pared down life. And she's only 17. And it's funny, Bronte, that when I've presented in bookshops and whatever, people like that story. They like the story about a 17-year-old cheeky, annoyed her parents are getting divorced and that she's suddenly gone from a very privileged kid to this nonsense of having to live in a gritty area of Boston, a very gritty area, where the airplanes pass right by the flat window almost. It's that gritty. It's like right at the back of the airport. So there's a big range of kind of characters in there. And there is, again, I found out from readers, not me, there is this recurring theme of your place and your displacement. And, families that aren't always getting on that well. But definitely the place is what I hear back from people. I mean, I had one American reader say, I was actually on the beach in this book. I could smell the sea. I could smell the salt, which I didn't see that, but apparently it is in there. And I didn't see that it was kind of unusual to have characters in such an age range, from that young, which I'm not, and I don't have teenage children, to, this two grannies. Actually, there are two different stories about grannies, and then there's all the ages in between as well. Most of them women, just struggling with who they are in the world and their both romantic relationships and family relationships.
It sounds wonderful. I love the fact that you have always got a cantankerous old woman in your stories. I wonder whether one day I might aspire to be a cantankerous old woman.
Well, to quote you, Bronte, write what you know. Because I've beaten you to it.
You are nowhere near old enough to be an old cantankerous woman.
I am already there.
So that book sounds beautiful. Trespassers and Other Stories. And those of you who are listening, if you're interested in finding out more about how you can read Áine's work, in the blurb that you will see alongside this podcast, you'll find all of her social media links and where you can buy her books. So you've mentioned you're traditionally published. For a lot of people, that is the holy grail, that you have had agents, you've had publishers. You must have learned a huge amount on this journey as a writer. Can you share with us some insight, some things that we should be watching out for, or some tips for being successful?
Well, I love that successful word, because I don't always think of myself that way, to be honest. I think a couple of tips. Number one would be with your own attitude. Like I say, I teach writing a lot. to different ages. And I love that. It's one of the reasons I don't really teach within a college, because I like going between, I've taught teenagers and I've taught, cranky old ladies who I love and end up laughing
Cantankerous
with.
old ladies.
Birds of a feather flock together. But I think what I hear from some students, and certainly I've been through it myself, is this, oh, I'm not entitled to write. I can't call myself a writer because traditionally, I don't know how your school system was, but we thought a writer was sitting there with a quill, and a gorgeous linen writing pad with all day to write. And then you were going to appear in some poor schoolgirl's academic book years later, after you were, pushing up daisies in the graveyard.
Yeah.
You're going to be, forever. And by the way, you would be a man, might I add.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
But I think, I love, there's a video by Michael Sheen, and he talks about how much more accessible we should make the arts to ordinary people who grew up in working class families. And I loved that video because it was echoing what was going through my own head of, yes, you have a right to be an artist. You have a right to be a writer. Look in the mirror. Your ancestors, whatever heritage you are, whatever ethnicity you are, your ancestors, I guarantee you, told story after story after story after story, much more than we do now because we don't have the time. So, of course, you're a writer if you want to be a writer. And of course, you should lay claim to that label. I run into this more than you'd think. Whether it's an online class or an in-person class, this kind of, well, I'm not a writer, and I just, and I don't want to get on my preachy, teachy little podium, but I just think, you probably had a grandmother and a great-grandmother and a father who was a master storyteller. It's how they survived whatever their factory job was, or their whatever, their farm job, their mining job, their whatever, cattle herding jobs. They were telling themselves stories, and all you need is to say, yeah, me too. Literally say, yeah, me too. I think that attitudinal shift is where then you say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to look at my diary, and even if I work a really busy day job, I'm going to find slots in there, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, where I'm going to do what I should be doing, which is writing, a few times a week. But I do think I've seen that need for the shift in attitude first, and my right to be a writer. And I think one of the things you don't know starting out is, because I've had a lot of work, single small works published in literary journals. And I think what I didn't know starting out, and I see the same with some of my students, is they're just like you and me. They have their tastes and they have stuff they hate. I mean, how many times have you seen this best-selling book and a friend shoves it into your hand to read and you hate it?
So many times.
So many times. Like 3 pages, and then you say, ugh.
It's not for me.
Not for me. I'm bored,
Yeah.
I think the same with the person purchasing your work, either for money or for publication. They too come with their own set of experiences, their own biases, their own openness to certain topics. So it's not, if you've done, so long as it doesn't have some terrible looper mistake on the first page, it's about the editor's own taste. So move on, go to the next editor. I think we personalize it, especially new writers personalize it too much and say, oh, it's me, etc. Now, sometimes it is. You need to fix something. But there are people too on the other end, and they're coming with the same reading tastes that we are. Their same openness to certain topics and their same closedness to certain topics. And I think once you discover that, it's easier, like you just feel better.
That's such good advice. And it makes me think about all the other authors that I've spoken to on this podcast and outside of this podcast that have said that they have been tenacious about querying agents, for example, because it just takes one agent who happens to like that writing style, the voice, the story, the premise, the trope, whatever it is. It only takes one to say, yes, I think this has got legs.
Right. Yeah.
And you're off.
Yeah.
But you could, we hear stories all the time about the most famous authors in the world, like J.K. Rowling, having had rejection after rejection after rejection because people didn't like the work. And now look, it's phenomenon.
Right.
So really good advice. And for anybody listening who's in those query trenches right now, remember that we all do have different tastes, but one of these days you're going to land on the desk of somebody who's looking for exactly what you've written. That's nice. What else can you tell us? Because I'm enjoying this. I'm getting lots of reassurance and top tips.
Excuse me. I think you have to keep at it as well. I have a rule for myself. I don't always stick to it, but I try it. When you get a rejection for an essay, because I also write nonfiction, when you get a rejection for a short story or an essay or whatever, a book idea, send it back out to somebody else within 24 hours. I have a 24-hour rule. And I keep a spreadsheet. I'm not very organized. I'm actually a very scattered writer. But I do have a spreadsheet of, small publishers, small presses. And it's literally, rejection from Tom, move on to Mary. Within 24 hours. If you leave it sitting too long, that's long enough for the doubts to creep in and the voice saying, you see, I told you that story was no good. But I get it out fairly quickly to the next one on my list. The other thing I wish I had done earlier was really research your publisher. Like, try and find them on YouTube speaking at something. You can read more than you think about people on YouTube. You really can. Or try and find them being interviewed someplace. Because you need to be choosy about picking them. It's, the boot can really be on the other foot. You don't, honestly, trust me, you don't want to be chosen for a short piece or a book-length piece or anything in between by a publisher or an editor who's just a bad match, who's not getting what you're speaking about, or who will sort of appoint themselves as knowing a lot about what you're writing, when in fact, if you had looked them up and looked at their own writing, their own published writing, you'd find out that actually they don't. So they're not the best choice for you.
Yeah, that's a really big point, because I think so many of us are so keen to nab a contract with an agent or with a publisher that we maybe don't do that, and we could rue that later. And how do I get it out into the world? Because I've self-published, so I don't have a big publisher behind me pushing this stuff and slapping posters up all over the subway. What do we do in that situation?
Well, first of all, I think the thing is that publishers, even traditional publishers, they're only putting up the posters for the people who are already famous. They're not putting them up.
I know, right? It's a bit of a catch-22.
It's a catch-22. And I mean, when I started out, they were doing some marketing for you. Now the marketing has gone to, you're on your own. You really are kind of on your own. They'll do a certain amount, but so I think it's hard because, like you, I have day jobby stuff, so I don't really have the time to be constantly out there marketing my book. I think also for me, I've thought a lot about this actually. I'm glad you brought this up, Bronte, because for me, I think, how much do I want to be, out there as a salesperson when in fact my nature is, going back to my grandfather and the witches and the foxes and the rabbits.
Yeah.
My nature is to be a quieter listener and a storyteller. So I think, podcasts like this are huge. They're enormous because, and I'll say this delicately, you can be proud of them as an author. You can replay a podcast and you can say, I'm really proud to have been chosen. I'm really proud that I got to be me on camera. Whereas other marketing outlets, some of them just, they make me feel very like that person trying to sell the car on Facebook, you know. It just feels, I don't know, but I think overall for either self-published or small published authors, we all have the same marketing task ahead of us.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I suppose it's just about imagining up who do you think is your audience? Who do you think would be interested in your book? And sort of being reader focused and saying what would be in it for them to read this book. What would be in it for them? It's not about me and my bank account, which
That is never going to.
never.
If you think you're going to be a writer for money, think again.
Forget it.
Think again.
Think again.
Unless you're John Mars or Stephen King or J.K. Rowling.
Exactly.
No.
I mean, the Authors Guild here in America did a survey 2 years ago. I want to say, don't quote me on that now. I think it was 2 years ago, on authors and how much they make on average. And this would be, fairly well published authors, and not including speakerships and teaching and all that. 2,000 a year.
What?
Yes, 2,000 and a little bit more, like 2,100. This is
So definitely don't do it for money. Do it for love.
No. Or I saw a comment, actually, I taught at a workshop in New York City a long time ago, quite a while ago. It was the Day Job book. And one woman, this really struck me as funny, afterwards said, it was a very practical book, and she's a very practical teacher. She said, all the other workshops were about, they were taught by people who had married a rich man. And she said, maybe they should have a workshop on how to trap a rich man who'll support your writing life.
Maybe we'll see if we can find a guest for the podcast that can teach us how to do that.
Brilliant. Absolutely perfect.
Sponsorship via marriage.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I've already got a husband, but he's very supportive, I must say. Joking aside, it does make life a lot easier if your partner likes what you do, is proud of what you do and supports it, even though it takes time and usually costs money, and they can't see necessarily any financial reward, but they can see it makes you happy and that's enough for them. So I think if you've got one of those, you're in a really good place.
Yes, you are. And, I forget which poet it was who said that, I think it was Mary Ruffle, said that writing isn't what you do, it's who you are. It's actually who you are.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that's
it's not
true.
what you do.
I think that spirit of the storyteller that I see in so many of the people that I'm talking to on this podcast, and I feel within myself, everything's a story for me, and I can see that that's always been the case for you, and it looks to me as if that's come through generations for you. The storytelling genes are strong. If you had one piece of advice to give to your fellow author community based on your experience, what would it be?
Oh, what a great question. I think it would be to make sure the work, just what we were talking about, that the work you're putting out in public is you. I know you have a different voice from the one you have in the supermarket, but that it matches your worldview and that you haven't sold yourself short. I think that's the big advice. It would be that you haven't chased all these trends. And of course, nowadays, with social media and everything, the trends are coming at us, like rain. But I think to just pull back from it, whether you have to do it on the bus or in your home or, whatever, and say, am I, is this matching who I am and what matters to me? Now, you may have written a story about, a fictional location in space in the galaxy. That's not what it's about, but is the work matching who I am? And, heaven forbid, after I'm dead, will I have been proud of this work?
It's really excellent advice. And I'm going to tell you why I think it's excellent advice. Always wanted to write a book. I've started lots. Always felt as if I should write something quite worthy, like a Booker Prize winning literary piece of beautiful, well researched, blah, 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 blah. That is not me. That's not me.
Yeah.
I am a soppy, romantic kind of a girl who loves countryside and dogs. So I've written a soppy, romantic, slightly racy book about romance and countryside and dogs. And and that's what I've written, and I love it. I had a kind of almost a snobbery about. I didn't want to say to people I'm writing romance because I was afraid they'd think I was frivolous. I was worried about how people would perceive me. And maybe they'd see me as not very serious. I'd have a proper grown-up corporate job. I run a business. I'm a managing director of a business, and I'm writing this frivolity. I was worried about judgment, but I'm over it.
Yeah.
So I think that advice is the best advice for everybody to remember, that you write what you
Yeah.
know and you write it with your
Yeah.
voice. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, a question for you and about you now. What does success, because we talked about success earlier and you laughed and you said, well, I don't know if I'd say I was successful. What does success as an author mean to you now, and has it changed?
It has definitely changed, and kind of touching on what you just talked about. I think in the early days, like when I wrote The Big Houses, 2006, and I think I thought I had to, very like what you're talking about, that really resonated with me. I think I thought I had to be this Irish or wannabe Irish writer. Even though people told me I didn't sound very Irish when I was at my own personal writing. Like when I was writing nonfiction pieces, they even got accused of sounding stuffy, but whatever. And I think, and I'm sorry about this, I think I tried to sort of write to recapture my identity because I was in a country that wasn't my own country, and in a huge, giant country with Hollywood hovering over the horizon, or actually, forget the horizon, hovering on top of your head. And I think I thought I had to kind of write to that, what people thought Irish writers should write. Put it that way, right? Kind of similar, very, very similar to what you're talking about, what people think of romance, what people think of women writers. Blah, 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 blah. Now I couldn't be bothered. I sit at my little table in the morning and I just write whatever story I'm writing. And if I don't sound Irish enough, well, that's too bloody bad. Oh, am I allowed to swear? Sorry. I think that's the mistake that I made about success. And the other thing about, I think a huge success would be, a long time ago, I think it was when that little book of short stories came out with the California people. I got this note from a random woman. I don't know who she was. And she said, that she was recovering from cancer. She was doing okay. And that one of my stories really resonated with her and sort of helped her. That's success to me.
That's absolutely beautiful.
I'm qualified to also teach, like my day job is in healthcare writing, and I'm qualified to teach wellness writing, writing as a way to sort of get, like meditation and that. And I had this lovely note from a student last year who said, I was driving today and I saw a sign saying, "What makes you smile?" And she said, I immediately thought of your class. I'm still smiling from your class. And, no matter how much, I get pulled off into nonsense about, am I published enough and am I marketing enough and am I this, am I that? And no, a woman going through the hardest time in her life sees a sign and thinks of our session together with a group of mostly women writers. That's like, I went to bed that night with a big, big smile on my face.
It's really, really lovely.
And it's not just her. It's not me, actually. It's having a group of writers together who are genuinely from their hearts are supporting each other. That's, and for real supporting each other. Like that to me, I'm not Mother Teresa, far from it. Ask my husband, far from it. But that to me is an enormous compliment, like huge compliment.
That's really lovely.
Yeah, I still tear up when I think about it. Like it really made me stop and think, okay, stop the marketing nonsense and all that. I know it's necessary, but this is really what matters. And this is success.
I saw a quote yesterday that I really, really loved. So this is a quote from Pablo Picasso. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away.
Oh, I
Isn't
love
that perfect?
Perfect.
It is perfect. And I've always believed that. And I think what we know now from hearing you talk is that you have a gift and that you have been giving it away. And this is part of the reason we don't make any money, folks. It's because we have gifts and we give them away. This is what we do, but we do it for bigger reasons. And everyone I ask this question about success of has a different reason. And not yet has anyone said for the money, weirdly. So that's a beautiful example of how your gift, you're giving your gift to others and they are receiving light and love from it. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. Which brings us neatly to the last part of our podcast, in which I ask you to switch hats from author to reader. And I'm going to give you 10 questions in 10 seconds. And I'm going to ask you to tell me which you would choose from the two options I give you. So as a reader, Anya, are you ready?
I'm ready.
As a reader, do you prefer sweet or spicy?
Spicy.
Fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Cliffhanger or happy ending?
Happy ending.
Short or long chapters?
Long.
Ebook or physical book?
Physical book.
Series or standalone?
Series.
Dog-eared or pristine?
Pristine.
One at a time or multiple choice?
One at a time.
And bookmark or fold the corner?
Bookmark.
Said with intention. Do not fold the corner was the unspoken part of that statement. And if you're not looking, if you're only listening, let me tell you that Anya just pulled a face that tells us that we should never fold the corners. Áine Greaney, it has been a privilege and a pleasure to spend this last little bit of time talking to you and learning from you and hearing about your work and about you. I will forever have this imagery of you having those stories told by your dear granddad there in Ireland. I think that's absolutely beautiful. Speaking with the voice of the witch or the fox or the rabbit. What a beautiful way to start your storytelling journey. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to seeing what else you produce and to reading your books. So everybody, thank you to Áine Greaney. Find her work, buy it, read it, and tell her what you thought of it. Thanks so much, and bye for now.
Thanks
Bye.
so much, Bronte. I loved it.
Tap, 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 she's lining up a scene. Coffee cup, cat's tail, dancing in the steam. Every little click spins a brand new theme. Mrs. Right, that's right.